Hi, my name is Mark Woodward and I work for the Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics, and I appreciate the opportunity to visit with you all today. At the Bureau of Narcotics, we're a state drug enforcement agency and we work all over the state of Oklahoma enforcing drug laws, which means going out and working meth labs to marijuana fields to other criminal violations when it comes to drugs. But when we're not working cases, we like to get out and get into the classroom, visit with students about some of the issues that are impacting Oklahoma. And most of this information you're going to hear is stuff that you've never heard before. It's not stuff from charts and graphs and research. It comes from the people we deal with every day, the homes that we're in. And you can take this information that I'm going to share with you, apply it to your life, and you guys can do whatever it is you want to do. You can also ignore this, but you need to be prepared to deal with the consequences of that. A lot of times students today, you're not hearing the downside when it comes to drugs. You may be hearing about how we need to legalize it and it's medicine or it brings in money for your state. But with anything else, whether it's prescription drugs or alcohol, it may be legal, but there's a dark side to it. And we're going to talk a little bit about the dark side today. And I hope you take this information and apply it to your life so that you don't have to deal with some of the pitfalls that we see other people dealing with because they got on this path. When people start using drugs, they're stepping on a train track. And it's only a matter of time until you start getting hit by these trains, whether it's with addiction, your health problems, problems at school, problems at home with your parents, with authorities, law enforcement, or at school, or you're getting a job someday. Nobody starts using drugs and getting on this path and they start getting more money, better grades, and doors opening for them. But unfortunately, kids don't often see that side of it because we've glamorized drug use in our music and movies and magazines. Maybe you've even experimented with drugs and you didn't notice any type of a negative outcome. And that's understandable at first because some of the effects can happen very slowly, but eventually these trains are going to hit you. And what I'm going to do through this presentation is I'm kind of blowing the whistle. I'm letting you know these trains are coming, but I cannot get you off the track. And when these trains start hitting you, don't blame the police, don't blame your parents, don't blame your friends. It will be a choice you make, and that's what this presentation is about. The choices you make are going to have consequences. And so I am encouraging you to make positive choices when it comes to drugs. One of the things that drives my passion is, yes, your life is going to fall apart. As I said, nobody starts using drugs and their life gets better, more money, more jobs. But as your life's falling apart, pieces of your life start hitting everybody around you. And that's what drives my passion here at the Bureau of Narcotics. We've seen too many people hurt, killed, or they're just emotionally impacted because of the choices of somebody else to get high on drugs. Whether it's a family of four who's killed out on the highway by somebody who chose to drink, whether it's an employer who's suffering and the other employees because an employee's not showing up at work because of their addiction to drugs. Your choices not only are going to impact you, but they will have consequences for everybody around you. And that's what drives my passion, to protect these innocent people who didn't sign up for this. And as I'm talking about drugs, I spend a lot of time talking about marijuana because today a lot of people want to say, well, there's marijuana and then there's the dangerous drugs. You know, marijuana is the drug that's going to cure all our problems and it's going to bring in money for our state. We need to focus on the dangerous drugs. I'm telling you, in my 25 years of drug enforcement experience, I've seen marijuana impact more lives than any other drug. I've seen it put more people on that train track than any other drug. Because typically, kids are not going to start out on meth or cocaine or heroin. They typically start out on marijuana and it seems benign and fun with their friends, and I get that. But the problem is, over time, your brain is going to love it. And when the brain figures out it loves something, it craves it. And suddenly that drug now owns you. And it takes more and more of the drug, more frequent use, or a stronger version of that drug to get to the same point because your brain will keep adjusting. Kids don't hear this. Again, you're bombarded with these messages that it's fun, it's cool, it's going to cause all this great economic impact and health benefits. But there is a dark side that you need to understand. So many of the people that I mentor with in sober living say that the thing that they would undo in their life was smoking weed with their friends when they were teenagers, because they will say that's what started them on this path to addiction. Because they may have started out 11, 12, 13 smoking marijuana. Over time it got boring because the brain will keep adjusting. And you need to understand, marijuana today is a science. It is not this harmless plant that people want to portray it. They're cloning it, splicing it, cross-pollinating to get a stronger and stronger product every single year. And the stronger it is, the more powerful and the more the brain's going to crave it. That's why I kind of call it this Trojan horse. You know, the story of the Trojan horse, where the enemy presented this beautiful gift on the outside to their enemy village. They said this is a peace offering, and so it looked so beautiful on the outside that their enemy opened up their gates and said, thank you so much, bring it in. And then inside was a dark side, and those were the enemy soldiers who came in and they ravaged that community. And that's what we're seeing with drugs today. On the outside, marijuana may be wrapped with this pretty bow that it's going to have these health and financial benefits, but there is a dark side that we've got to talk about, and I've seen it impact so many kids because kids are not hearing the message that this has a dark side and that your brain's going to love it and they will get a hold of them. And so you've got to understand that some of the things you may be hearing on TV or from your friends, while it may feel good right now, there are going to be consequences. And marijuana, you know, the kids are being told, well, I vape it, it's a safer method of doing it. We're seeing so many kids who are now vaping marijuana, and vaping's never been safe. E-cigarettes have never been safe. You're just trading one problem for another. Whereas cigarettes, you have the smoke and the tar. With the vaping, you've got the chemicals and the metals and the charcoals. Plus, with the marijuana oil, it is such a thick oil that it coats the lining of the lungs. And we are seeing more and more kids, anywhere from 11, 12, 15, 17 years old, ending up in the hospital because they're having difficulty breathing, because the body cannot extract that chemical that is coating the lining of their lungs. There's not enough information being shared about this to kids, and so they think this is a safer alternative to smoking and inhaling harmful smoke. And so be real careful with the information you're hearing from your friends. And I have a lot of people say, well, but at least they don't do stupid, violent things high on marijuana like those hard drugs. Not everybody does. And I don't paint with a broad brush that everybody that smokes marijuana is going to get addicted, that everybody that smokes marijuana is going to become violent. But you also can't paint with a broad brush that it's a harmless drug and that our attention needs to be focused elsewhere. There are plenty of cases in which today's potent marijuana has caused some very violent episodes. A couple of them I'm going to share with you right now. There was a situation in a parking lot up in Edmond where a 17-year-old kid grabbed a baby in a baby carriage out of a woman's shopping cart and threw the child to the ground. And then he keeps walking through the parking lot, and you can see him here in this yellow circle. He's bending over a parking lot sign like it's a soda straw. The police encounter him. They think he's high on PCP, which typically causes violent hallucinations and this superhuman adrenaline strength. But the only drug he tested positive for in custody was THC, marijuana. It was a condition created in the brain called marijuana psychosis. It doesn't happen with everybody, but again, you can't think that because it's just marijuana, it's the harmless drug that doesn't have any side effects. We saw a teenager up in Edmond who was shot and killed after he and his girlfriend had smoked some marijuana they'd stolen from their uncle. He suddenly starts hallucinating. He takes his clothes off, breaks into a neighbor's house, and starts fighting two Edmond police officers. They ended up having to use lethal force, and again, they thought PCP, and the only drug in his system was THC. We also had a couple of nurses at a hospital who were beat up by a patient who snapped leather restraints in the ER, and he only tested positive for THC. So again, kids are oftentimes not hearing the downside. You're only hearing the plus side, and there are going to be consequences, and you need to be prepared to deal with those. Nobody's going to put you on this track. Nobody's going to put a gun to your head. It'll be a choice you make. And you've got to be strong enough to stand and resist those temptations when your friends are trying to pressure you. A true friend, is literally or figuratively, is not going to force you onto a train track. They're going to be telling you to stay off of there. So if you've got friends pressuring you to use marijuana or continue to use, these are not your friends, because they're either ignorant to the potential negative effects or they just don't care. And we don't want any of you all to listen to those voices and continue to think that this is a harmless path that you're on right now, because we see a different side of it every single day at the Bureau of Narcotics. And it causes kids to do other things that they're going to regret. Another choice is financial and also, social media freight trains. If you get arrested because of things that you've done, you're talking about potentially thousands of dollars in legal expenses for you and your family because you chose to have marijuana on you or drive under the influence. Social media, there's a lot of kids who are bragging about the things they're doing. This is a 16-year-old girl in Tulsa. She's putting 2 bags of marijuana on her Facebook page. Now, I'm not sure who she's trying to impress, but it took us about 10 minutes to find her, and when we did, she's very upset and very remorseful, but she can't undo this. Even though she said, well, I deleted it. You need to understand everything you post is a permanent part of the internet. Even if you delete it from your phone, it's still on your phone. Law enforcement can retrieve it. But There could be a college someday you go to apply for and you're thinking, I've got all these grades and awards and medals, and then they do a quick social media check and they see that you're posting things like this on your Facebook page of marijuana or drinking at a party. They may be second guessing whether or not that this is somebody they want to offer a scholarship to. They only have so many scholarships to go around. Same with maybe you graduate from high school, you graduate from college, and again, you've got a great resume, but then some employer someday, they're going to do a social media check. They find something you posted. So these are some social media freight trains you need to be aware of. That your choices will have consequences. So be really careful about the people you're hanging around, the people you're trying to impress, maybe with some of your Facebook posts and other social media posts. And again, you may be at a party sometime. There's a lot of designer drugs thanks to the internet and chemistry the way it is today. Anybody can put two chemicals together, give it a name and a price tag, and put it on the streets, and that's what they're doing. And so it's hard to keep up with some of the drugs that are out there. But a lot of times kids get a false sense of security that this must be a safe drug because they're at a party and other kids are taking these pills that maybe have cartoon characters or other types of designs like an ecstasy tablet. Maybe they've had ecstasy before, they assume that that's what it is. But I'm going to let you in on a little secret. About 85% of the ecstasy that we see here in Oklahoma is not ecstasy. It's testing positive for something else. It could be something harmless and benign. That first drug on row 2 there, that brown pill, tested unknown. But it wasn't anything harmful. It could be compressed dirt for all we know. Some of these tested positive for pure methamphetamine, and we're seeing more ecstasy that's being compressed with fentanyl. Fentanyl can be a very deadly drug, but it's cheap, and so a lot of drug organizations are using it as a filler because even they don't understand just how dangerous it can be. So when your friend says it's good stuff, your friend's an idiot. Your friend got it from a guy who got it from a guy who got it from a guy. Your friend doesn't know what's in it. So be real careful, again, the choices you're making about who you hang out with and the stuff that they're into, because they will pull you down with them, and it can be very dangerous. Another drug issue that we're seeing that a lot of kids are getting into because they don't see the downside are prescription drugs. There's this mentality that, well, if it's prescribed by doctors, dispensed by pharmacies, and my parents have it at home, it must be a safe, free high, and nothing could be further from the truth. One of our biggest drug categories when it comes to overdoses and deaths are prescription drugs that people are getting from their doctor and they're picking up from the pharmacy. If it is not your drug or you're taking too much of one of your drugs, it can absolutely have deadly consequences. And you don't want to live with the guilt of knowing that you killed one of your friends because you supplied them with a pill when they were having a bad day, or you were at a party and you wanted to be the cool kid who's got the drugs that nobody else has access to. I get that. You want to be popular. You want to fit in. You want to feel like you've got a group that can identify with you. But then you could end up hurting one of your friends because you supplied the drug, the alcohol, that maybe ended up hurting them. And so again, there's consequences to the choices you're making. And so be real careful with prescription drugs. Never share your medicine. Never take more of your medicine than you're supposed to, and don't take somebody else's medication. But it's all about what's happening inside the brain. If using drugs felt like chewing on broken glass, we would not have a drug problem. The problem is the brain is going to love drugs because the brain releases chemicals called dopamine, one of your primary pleasure-seeking drugs. That goes to the front of your brain and hits these pleasure receptors that says, wow, I love this. I wish that wasn't the case. I wish it was like chewing on nails or glass. But the brain is going to say, I love this. And when the brain figures out it loves something, it sends a little trail of glutamate back to the center of the brain, which is kind of a little breadcrumb trail that says, oh, I'm going to help make sure you never forget what was the source of your pleasure. So if the brain figures this out, that it likes something, whether it's marijuana, whether it's alcohol, drugs of any kind, prescription, gambling, the brain is going to want to have this behavior continued and fed, basically. And if you don't feed it, the brain starts playing a little evil game of, I'm going to get back with you. They call it dope sick. Drugs withdrawals can be psychological, where they hallucinate. They can have physical withdrawals, vomiting, diarrhea, fever, cramps. The brain is going to rebel and cause the whole body to rebel if it doesn't get what it wants. And that's when this little switch goes on in the brain. Now, that doesn't happen with everybody. Some people try marijuana. They hate how it makes them feel. They don't become addicted. Some people try a few sips of alcohol or some prescription pain medicine after a surgery. They don't like how it makes them feel, and they don't become an addicted person because that switch doesn't go on in the brain. But if the switch goes on, one thing you need to understand is there is no way to turn that switch off. And that is another one of those little freight trains that just hit you. Your brain's going to love drugs. It's going to crave them. and you will become sick and dependent on those drugs if you do not continue to feed this craving. And so that is why we can't stress enough that there is an absolute dark side to the choices you're making when it comes to drugs. Don't just listen to what you see from your friends or in the movies or the TV that just show the glamorous and the fun side and the party and the money and the cash, partying lifestyle that's portrayed. That's not the reality. That's not Oklahoma. That's Hollywood. In reality, what's happened is the first time you use drugs, you see the chart here, boy, they're going up, rocking and rolling because the dopamine's going. It's telling them, man, this is the most incredible drug I've ever had in my life. But you see what happens after the next one. The next high is not quite as high. Still feels good. The brain's still going, okay, we're doing something I like. But it knows it's not quite where I was. And that's sadly why so many people overdose, is they think, it was okay, but it wasn't where I was. They're chasing that first high. They call it chasing the dragon. And they think, well, maybe if I just load another cc in that syringe or take a second pill or another shot of that drink, that'll get me back up there, and that's not how it works. What's happening is every time you're using drugs, you're burning up some of your dopamine, and you're also damaging some of your dopamine receptors. And so you could use a swimming pool full of drugs the second time. You will never get as high as you were the first time. You don't have enough dopamine left, and you don't make any more. So you can see over time, that high is getting less and less, and it could be a matter of weeks or months, maybe a year or two, but pretty soon drug addicts are not using drugs to get high. They're using drugs just to kind of get to normal. This is where they are in that dope sick. And this is what we deal with every day. Now, I get it. Right now, you may be up there in the partying with your friends and having a good time and going, man, this guy's wasting my time. Like I said, I'm just trying to blow the whistle and let you know these trains are coming, because this does not keep getting better and better and better and better. It only gets worse and worse and worse and worse, because that switch is on and the brain is going to crave it. And this is why there's so much crime and violence associated with drug use. It can take us, some of the sweetest people we've ever met, and turn them into monsters, because the body is craving that drug. They're going through withdrawals. They may be hallucinating. This is why we see somebody get a gun and they go down to the stop and rob and they shoot a clerk in the middle of the night for $40 in the cash register. It's not so they can go party with their friends. It is because they're so desperate for that drug. We've seen take some of the sweetest people you know and turn them into violent criminals because they're so desperate. And they don't oftentimes even realize what they're doing because of the withdrawals they're going through. So there's a lot of crime and violence associated with drug use because of the people trying to get out of what they call the dope sick. And we've even told people about deadly forms, like I was telling you about fentanyl. And oftentimes when we tell people how deadly fentanyl is, if they're down here, they're actually out on the street trying to get it. And when you tell these people that stuff can kill you, they're going to look at you, and I've had them tell me, I'm already dead. They know that their body's falling apart, their health is a mess. They're not thinking about living or dying. They're thinking about, how do I get out of this pain and this misery for the next half hour? And if it just killed a bunch of people on the streets of Chicago, Detroit, or Kansas City, they're thinking maybe that's strong enough to get me out of the dope sick for a while, to get out of here. It is the way the drugs interact. And so again, we're just trying to blow the whistle, let you know these trains are coming. This is the dark side of drug use that a lot of kids never hear because you're just being bombarded with the plus side of it. And I get that. Here's another little dose of reality. Drugs are not free. Your brain's going to crave it. The switch is on. And if you don't have money today, you can't just go, well, I guess I don't use drugs. You're going to need drugs every day because that switch is on, the brain's craving it. And if you don't feed that craving, you're going to get dope sick. And I'm going to give you an example. This is Mexican tar, black tar heroin. As you can see in that slide there, it's about the size of the tip of your finger. This is about $160 a gram in Oklahoma City. A typical heroin addict will need about 4 grams a day. That's almost $700 every 24 hours. And you will find $700 every 24 hours, because if you don't, again, they're back down here with the dope sick. So you're going to find a way to get it. Now, you don't just go to mom and dad and ask them for a loan. Probably they've already kicked you out of the house because of your violent behavior and stealing from them. You're not going to go to your friends because they're tired of you stealing their stuff and lying to them. You have nothing left in the bank. Here's how you do it. You know, while I'm sitting here working, doing this video, somebody who's needing a rock of cocaine's out in the parking lot. They just broke out my car window and stole my laptop. Not because they need a new laptop. It's because they're going to trade that at a pawn shop tonight for $25. And that will get them, you know, at least maybe 15 to 20 minutes of relief before the dope sick comes back. Meanwhile, while I'm at work or you're at school, they're over at your house, climb over your fence, and they go into your backyard and they're stealing your dad's lawnmower or his golf clubs out of his storage shed. Not because he's going to play golf, but because this guy's going to trade those golf clubs for $15. And again, we're talking $15, $20 at a time through you and I. You know, we're getting hit by those financial freight trains because of somebody else's choice to get drugs. Drugs are not free. It's your choice if you want to use drugs, but you better be prepared to deal with the fact that your brain's going to love it, your brain's going to need it every day, and they are not free. And again, if you're talking about a $700 a day habit, you can see how these people leave a string of victims behind, nickel and dime at a time. It could be violent criminals, robbing stores, stealing somebody, robbing them in a parking lot, or it could be property crimes, identity theft. So many of our crimes today go back to somebody's addiction, whether you're talking about methamphetamine, heroin, cocaine. It's going to be a costly habit, and you don't just walk away from it if you don't have money in your wallet because of the dope sick. And don't think, well, if I get hooked on drugs, my dad will just put me on a plane and send me to treatment and I'll get cured. As I said before, once that switch is on, you cannot turn it off. People do not go to drug treatment to get cured. People go to drug treatment to learn to live with that trigger, that switch on every single day for the rest of their life. You might hear a story of a guy who goes to an AA or an NA meeting and he says, "Hi, my name's Bob and I'm an alcoholic," and everybody goes, "Hi, Bob." And they may ask, "Bob, when was your last drink?" "Oh, it was October 18th, 1980. "Well, Bob, that was 40 years ago. You're cured." Bob's not cured. Bob still wakes up every day wanting a beer. Bob still listens to that voice in his head from time to time at the grocery store that says, "Buddy, it's just a six-pack. What's the big deal?" Every day he's fighting that craving, and every day he denies giving into that craving is another victory for an addict in recovery. But that switch is still on. And again, kids don't hear about this, but this is the way the brain works. And the brain can be very, very manipulative. And 92% is about the relapse rate for addicts, even those who repeat treatment and recovery, because that switch is still on. And so especially those who go back to their same friends and they're faced with those same triggers every day that got them on this road to addiction to begin with. Your choices are going to impact other people. And this is what really breaks my heart, because the typical drug users in Oklahoma are 18 to 38. 72% of the homes that we serve drug warrants in, there's kids under the age of 12 years old. Half of these homes don't have running water or electricity. Mom hadn't been home in 3 days. They don't have a job to pay bills. Any money they have goes to their addiction. And oftentimes it's the 9-year-old who's having to raise the 7-year-old, the 5-year-old, and the 13-month-old baby. I sit on the State Drug Endangered Children Advisory Board, and I have seen too many children who end up dead or in the hospital because of the choices of somebody else, usually a caregiver, a parent, to get high on drugs. It's a choice to start with, but then it becomes a disease that just grows and festers and gets stronger and stronger to the point where you may not be able to imagine this now, but they get to the point where they put their drugs ahead of their children, their own health. Everything becomes second to feeding that addiction. And again, there's a lot of kids paying a steep price because of an adult's choice to get high on drugs. We've seen way too many dead bodies of children inside these homes and some negative outcomes. We've seen a lot of homes blowing up because of these extraction labs, whether they're cooking meth or extracting marijuana oil. And people want to talk about the fun side, the financial side of marijuana, the health side. They don't want to talk about the downside. But a lot of these marijuana oils are being manufactured in homes, and we're seeing more and more fires associated with them, people getting burned. This was a guy who 2 years before this fire happened, an explosion in a drug lab in Moore. He and his girlfriend were actually Moore High School students, and they were sitting in one of my presentations that I did at Moore High School. And I'm sure they were sitting at the back of the room saying to themselves, "Man, this guy is wasting my time." I hope and I pray that I am wasting your time, that you're not on these train tracks, that these trains have no way of hitting you. But it can be a short trip down that track before you start getting hit, whether it's smoking marijuana to trying some meth to cooking meth or extracting marijuana oil in your house and possibly ending up in my PowerPoint. He and his girlfriend both passed away, and they were just young kids with their whole lives ahead of them who thought that will never happen to me. And again, you're not going to get better looking, smell better. The sad thing is, when you're hooked on drugs, you're not even going to care about your hygiene. Again, the only thing that will matter will be drugs. People want to portray drug users on TV. They're oftentimes gorgeous models in Hollywood, but the reality is it will tear you up. And as bad as some of these people look on the outside, their liver, the kidney, all the damage that's going on with their lungs and the brain tissue is much worse than what you see on the outside. These are the real pictures and the real people that we have to deal with. When I was in high school, and I grew up here in Oklahoma City and went to Yukon High School, and I had this player on my baseball team and basketball team. This guy was good at everything he did. And of course, you probably have some of those friends too. And you're going, "Man, I wish I had half the talent they did." This kid's name was Donnie Phillips, a great kid. But around 9th grade, he started smoking marijuana with some of the other kids in the high school, and he started getting this I don't care attitude. He gave up playing baseball, stopped playing basketball, pretty much just quit school. All he did was want to stay home and smoke marijuana. You fast forward to today, he's been in and out of the Oklahoma Department of Corrections basically since he was in high school. His rap sheet is so long, and this was such a good kid. But now you look at him, it's drug possession, armed robbery, burglary, stolen property, drug possession. It gets a hold of even the best kids who say, I'm not going to let that happen to me. This was a talented kid. I would have given anything to have his kind of athletic ability. When I was in high school, and this is me, you can laugh, I had hair. I played the drums. I still play the drums today. I love doing it. And I was in the Yukon Jazz Band, and we were pretty good. We won several competitions, but I was never the top drummer. He's standing next to me to my right. His name's Jay Hilburn. Jay was such a great drummer that he got a full scholarship to UCO in Edmond. His freshman year at UCO in Edmond, he stayed in his apartment, drank beer and smoked marijuana, and flunked out. It became that important to him because, again, it's the brain saying, I need this, I want this, this will solve my problems. Maybe you're going through depression, a dark time, you've got issues in your family, but I promise you turning to drugs and alcohol is not going to be the answer. It may numb those pains for just a short period of time, but then you're adding a much deeper issue on top of what you're already going through. You fast forward to today, besides flunking out of UCO, a couple of years ago, Jay Hilburn put a gun in his mouth and pulled the trigger and committed suicide. Because of his addiction and depression to alcohol, marijuana, and just never able to get his life back on track. It can happen to anybody, anytime. Now, I am not trying to be a buzzkill. I don't want you to go, man, this guy just doesn't want me to have any fun. Man, my parents just don't want to have any fun. My teachers, they're always on my case. Police want to take all my fun away. That's not what this is about. This is about blowing the whistle and letting you know these trains are coming. We care enough to blow the whistle. It'd be like, you know, it's a cold night and you're all comfortable in your bed and you got your dog at your feet, and suddenly at 3 in the morning you hear this pounding on your window. You see me as the bad guy. What I'm trying to tell you is you're about 8 seconds away from the second floor of your house coming down on your head. Now, am I a bad guy for pounding on your window and waking you up in the middle of the night? Or would I have been a bad guy if I just kept right on driving and said that's somebody else's problem, not my house, probably nobody home, nobody cares? That's what we're trying to do. That's what your parents, the police are trying to do. We care enough about you guys because we don't want to see you ending up on this path of what we have to deal with every day. And right now, the good news is it is not too late for you. There's a lot of people in prison, treatment, or dead who would love to trade places with you, but they stayed on the train tracks too long. If you're not on those tracks, don't get on those, and you are in a great place. The good news is if you're already on those tracks, maybe you're trying some marijuana from time to time, you drink alcohol with your friends, it is not too late to get off of those tracks. Because there's some trains that are forgiving and there's some trains that are not forgiving. And you don't have to worry about it. The most important slide of my entire presentation as I wrap this up is this one. If there's something going on in your family, if there's something going on that you just don't know who to talk to, you don't want to tell anybody, maybe it's shame, maybe it's embarrassment, maybe it's pain with a loved one that you know, maybe it's somebody who's a potential threat there at your school and you're just afraid, whether it's guns or drugs, knives, things like that, you can contact me at the Bureau of Narcotics and you will remain anonymous and we can get you help. We've got treatment options available. We've got sober living. We've got mentors. We've got a lot of people who know how to reach out and just let you know that there's hope out there for you and your family. And we can also get in touch with the school if you know of some type of a threat. You just don't want to report it because you don't want to be that kid. I get that. Go on Facebook, send us a private message. Those come right to my desk. Every single one of our private messages to our Facebook page remain anonymous. But if there's something you need help with, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Again, my name's Mark Woodward. I'm with the Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics, and I really appreciate your time. Good luck and God bless.